All right, so the session that you have joined is Innovative Supports for Refugees and Bridges in ICAPS. And great news for you this morning, because not only did you get to start off with a fantastic welcome and overview from ICCB showing the collaboration between the different divisions, in this breakout session, you're going to see a lot of additional collaboration at a local program level, collaboration with multiple presenters, because we have a lot of fantastic brains here telling you about the work that they're doing. So I'll tell you a little bit about all of the people that we have sharing today in this collaborative session. But first, a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. All of our attendees do have the ability to unmute yourselves. We ask that you refrain from unmuting yourself as our presenters are talking, first of all. And then if you have questions, put them in the chat, or if presenters, it's kind of up to them if they're going to share all of their content and then take questions at the end. There is some time for some questions, though, so we want to make sure that you get your questions answered. This session is being recorded, and you will be able to locate the recording on our Transitions Academy on the ICAPS website following the end of the conference. And we're going to give that information to you in the chat as well. And then lastly, PD certificates will be emailed to you from SIPDC at sipdctrainer.com, and we'll put that information in the chat as well. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce you to our first two presenters. They're from World Relief, Aurora and DuPage, and that's Sarah Taylor and Heather Davis. And I'm going to take my screen down and let them take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm just going to move my bar so I can start this slideshow. Thank you again. My name is Sarah Taylor, and I'm the Director of Adult Education with World Relief in DuPage and Aurora. Can you? Okay. All right. So you should be able to see this now. I will get started. So what we want to talk about today with our time is how we, as a community-based organization that is a refugee resettlement agency, design our bridge and transition programming for our English language learners. And so what I want to start with is really a where are we now? So where are we now and how did we get here? And I'm joined by Heather Davis, who is our Job and Career Readiness Manager, who oversees our bridge programming, and the whole team of curriculum developers who oversee this process and work really closely with our workforce development team to design our bridges and ensure that there is just a seamless transition into community college, ICAPS programming, vocational training programs. But to start, where are we now? Right now, we have 7 bridges for our English language program. So they're all ELA contextualized bridges because we are a strictly ELA program. As a refugee resettlement agency, we have about 1,100 adult learners, and they're all in the English language branch of our adult ed programming. And these 7 bridges run both synchronously, asynchronously, hybrid formatting, and in person. The most attended every year is our Workforce Readiness Bridge because it is most specifically designed for our resettled refugees. So everyone who comes through all of our offices comes through first this Workforce Readiness class before they begin their first jobs in the U.S. It's really a cultural awareness, initial job skills, and an initial survival language skills that are needed contextually for the workplace at large in the U.S. Then we have an emerging careers bridge, which covers the top 5 most in-demand careers and career clusters in the Chicagoland region. Navigates different careers that are available within those industries and the skill sets that are needed, as well as how to find a job in that industry and then pursue additional training for that. We have a general healthcare bridge, which covers general healthcare industries. Again, similar to the emerging careers, how to navigate careers in that field, what are the skills and vocational training programs and academic training programs that are available to pursue careers in that field. And then specifically, we have designed and worked on a pipeline with College of DuPage on CNA. So we have a specific healthcare CNA bridge program that transitions into an ICAPS CNA with College of DuPage. We also just started piloting an early childhood education bridge that includes a practicum for early childhood, and then working through transitions there as well. And right now in development, which we'll discuss a bit later, is our sewing and workforce readiness bridge. And then we have an academic readiness bridge that's pending approval. And that academic readiness bridge we'll talk about again more, but is really looking at where our weaknesses are as a program, where our students are weakest, and so where they're having the greatest struggle in transitioning into ICAPS programming or additional vocational training programs, and really helping to bridge that gap and meet that need. So again, in that bridge framework. I'm really looking at this piece of how we got here is looking at one, the hard truth that ICCB requires us to run a bridge. And so that's kind of historically how we started with our bridges, being an English language only program, really just running leveled English language classes. And then with this requirement to run a bridge, what that meant for us in terms of how to start thinking along the lines of not just equipping students to develop self-sufficiency in their communities, but also in the workplace. And really then taking that workforce readiness class that we've been running for 25 years and using that as kind of a launch pad to say, look at this pattern that we're doing right now with equipping our adult learners for the workplace. How do we build that out and work with employer partners we already have and better identify student needs? And so to get after that, to not just meet the requirement and check it off, but to say, how do we actually then get to the heart of the requirement, which is building self-sufficiency, not just in day-to-day life in a community, but also in the workplace, so that our adult learners can upskill and actually develop economic self-sufficiency as well. And so really that meant diving deeper into our bridges to build out more, to revamp the ones that we had, and then to look at adaptive support services. So really a lot of, when I look at where we're at with our bridge programming and a lot of our just program design, adaptive management is huge. It's huge within the refugee resettlement realm, but it's really huge for adult education with English language learners as well. And we'll talk a bit about why later. But looking at that adaptive management piece as applied to our support services also. So always looking at what do our students need to actually access classes, and to not just access the classes, but be able to succeed in them. And so looking at both tangible student support services and intangibles. So tangible like transportation, childcare, intangible like digital literacy, multilingualism. And then the next thing in how we kind of built out these 7 bridges that we have right now, just in the last couple of years, is also utilizing what's already available and really being adamant to not reinvent the wheel. And so looking at what's already available through ICCB, talking a lot with the PDN and our different professional development providers to look at what resources are already available, what's already been created, and how can we take that then and apply it to our own context. And that really just helps us to short circuit that whole development phase if we already have something available that then we can just make applicable to our context. And then another adaptive piece is adaptive instruction and design, knowing that employer needs are constantly changing in Chicagoland, even with the development of technology, AI, the whole kind of environment of our employers, both in factory settings and in career readiness settings. There is constantly changing. And so how do we not just keep running the same bridge year after year? How do we then look and go to those employers and say, what's working, what isn't working, what's changed? And where are students struggling to retain their jobs? And then how do we then support those students in the classroom at that curriculum development level and at the student support level to make sure they're still succeeding? And that all required us to have, just undergirding all of this, developing a philosophy for our bridge programming to begin with, which incorporated the above kind of observations of what we needed to help our students succeed. And so in that philosophy of what we really kind of run all of our ideation through as we're developing bridge programming is ensuring that a bridge is actually a bridge to somewhere. And I really do appreciate that these are called bridges because of what they are truly intended for, and to really bridge students in an ELA context, to bridge students from a general English language journey into career development, into upskilling, and to provide the students what they need to get there. And looking at a bridge, you have all of the support structures, and even just looking at what types of supports. So if we have this type of bridge, we need these, triangles or arcs or circles in order to create a really strong, solid bridge. And so looking architecturally at how a bridge is designed and developed is kind of the same type of thought process and really comprehensive, holistic look that we need to take at our bridges to make sure it is a self-sustaining bridge. It will get the students across the other side, and it actually achieves its purpose and isn't going to crumble halfway through or is going to have nothing at the other side. And so really wanting to make sure that our bridges are a bridge to somewhere where there's either concrete access to an ICAPS, there's vocational training opportunities at the end, that there is some student success coach or career navigator that's going to help a student move from the bridge into that opportunity, that there are entry-level positions immediately available or careers with little to no additional training requirements. And in designing bridges, ensuring that there's actual student demand. And so it's this twofold piece where you must have real student demand and real employer need. I'll share in a bit about a flop that we had where we designed an ICAP strictly on employer need, but there was no student demand. And so it completely flopped, and looking at both on the end of creating something that no one wants, but then also creating something that we don't want to force adults into career fields, because we have watched time and time again in our resettlement world, the retention rates are atrocious. And even the mental health that provides, the trauma that reinforces, and then the upskilling that's not happening. And so if we want to, on our end, if we're just looking strictly at metrics, if we want to meet those wage metrics, if we want to meet retention, if we want to meet level gains, we also need to ensure that there's actual student demand. And if even above that, we want to support our students in the best way possible and truly set them up for success, we need to provide something that they actually want. So just that threefold piece of bridge to somewhere, there's real student demand and real employer need. The flop that I referenced was a CNC ICAPS that we attempted a couple of years ago to meet this requirement to offer an ICAPS. What we learned from that is that as a small CBO, we are not outfitted to sustain on our own an ICAPS because of the sheer cost, and because of that 75% of our learners are in the NRS 1 to 3 realm. We didn't even have a student base that could actually sustain that, even if there was student demand. And there was only one student. So we developed this entire program because there was real employer need with a strong employer partner, and there was very little take from our students. And so running an entire ICAPS program for one student was not sustainable. And so really looking at how do we come back at this and meet the need of access to ICAPS through partnerships that are actually strong and can help us, again, connect student need with employer demand with a self-sustaining program that we can't offer. So working really closely with our community college partners and local vocational training programs. So at this point, I'm going to turn it to Heather, who will share about our first bridge program that we created.
Good morning. So yes, this is kind of an outline of, as Sarah said, our first bridge program, which was a healthcare bridge. And it tends to be the broad outline that we follow as we have been developing our other bridges. So the first thing we did was we found out about what was interesting to our students. And what we kept hearing over and over again was there's an interest in healthcare. And then so we went and we explored what's the need out there? Well, there's always going to be a need for healthcare. So whatever somebody decides to pursue, they will be able to find a position in there. We were also able to go and speak with people, a lot of HR representatives from various clinics and hospitals to get information about, yes, we're always looking for people for entry-level positions, and we can promote from within. We wanted to create something that was realistic and achievable. So that's why we started our healthcare by looking at entry-level positions for our students. That's that we knew that they would need very little training in order to get into that foundational first step into their profession. So we looked at phlebotomy, home health care aid, and pharmacy tech were a couple of the ones that we looked at. And then we wanted to focus a lot on job preparedness, making sure that they had a good resume, that they knew how to search for jobs online. So we introduced them to websites such as Indeed.com. And we did really intensive interview prep so that they were ready to answer not only just general questions, but those higher level questions that employers ask in order to assess out critical thinking skills and problem solving skills. And then it's always good to have some kind of incentive for students. And so for our healthcare bridge, we offer a CPR training at the end. And so the students know that when they complete the class, they will be able to attend a CPR training and leave there with CPR certification, which makes them feel confident, but it's also something to add to their resume. And also for our special CNA class, we're putting together kind of like a little nurse's bag to congratulate them when they complete the whole program. And so we're looking at putting in some things that they might use in their future medical careers. So like medical flashlight, stethoscope, those kinds of things. And then one success story about the healthcare, just to kind of show you how things work together. We had a student. She had been a surgeon in her home country. And when she came here, she knew she wasn't going to be able to pursue that line of work, but she wanted to stay in the medical field. And quite frankly, she probably could have taught the healthcare bridge class. But she was quite the support for the rest of the students, and she was just wonderful to work with. But she and I got to speaking, and it was like, what do you really want to do? And she was like, I've got to be realistic, but I think I want to go into research. Great. What can I do to help you? She said, well, I've already been researching about becoming a researcher, but I need help with my resume and interview questions and that kind of thing. I said, well, you're in the right place. So we spent a lot of time with everybody in the class. Everyone leaves with a workable resume. We go over interview questions thoroughly, and then again, being able to search for jobs. So she found a job that she wanted at a university hospital in the city. She went for the interview and she got the job. And when she came back, she said, I have to tell you, I'm really glad that you in her words, hammered those interview questions into us, because those were the questions that they asked, and I had my answers ready, and I was able to answer them and feel confident in English. So that's one of our success stories with our healthcare bridge. And then one of our exciting partnerships that we just started this past summer and fall is working with COD with the CNA bridge to ICAPS pipeline. So as I said, we have a partnership with COD, and our program, we provide the pre-bridge or the first bridge. There are actually two bridges and an ICAPS. And our bridge it's roughly like our healthcare bridge, except all we're focusing on is CNA, because that's what the students are shooting for. So we talk about what the CNA job is. We talk about, there's more vocabulary. After talking with representatives at COD, what were some of the challenges that students were facing? It was a conversation, so speaking and listening. So we incorporated a lot more speaking and listening activities and specific activities focused on speaking with your coworkers in a medical setting, speaking with patients. So we incorporated those. Then the students will transfer to an advanced bridge that's being taught by COD instructors with the ultimate goal of going into a CNA ICAPS. And when they complete that, they will get their certification, and COD will help them find employment. So one of the things that I really want to stress is the success coaches at both institutions, both at World Relief and at COD, were crucial to helping our students be able to transition from our bridge program into the advanced bridge at COD. So what we have heard for years is our clients who are going through our ELL program are really intimidated by a college setting. It's overwhelming to them. And that is what has prevented a lot of them from pursuing certifications and degrees. And so we were like, we're not going to let that happen. So we got our success coaches involved. They were involved from day one. They went in at our classes, they introduced themselves, they went in periodically with their students so the students would get to know them. They were instrumental in helping to get our students tested so they could transition to COD. Our success coach was communicating with the success coaches at COD to set up registration times. Once we got our students over to COD, our success coaches met them at COD, took them in, and the COD success coaches got them registered. They took them on a wonderful tour. They even took them to the building where they were going to have their classes. So those students were prepped, they were ready, and they weren't going to be intimidated on their first day of class. And I cannot say enough about the importance of having success coaches in helping your students transition. Then we also provide multilingual support. We have interpreters. If there are questions, we always had interpretation support, particularly as we were working on the transition phase from our bridge to the COD bridge. And again, we also, there are resource incentives. As I said, even these students got their CPA certification. And then of course, at the end, once they've completed the advanced bridge and their ICAPS, then COD helps them find a job. And then, as we all know as instructors, it's important to know your learners. And when you're constructing a bridge, a lot of our immigrant and refugee ELs, they're highly motivated and they're often skilled. And they're coming into these bridges focused on either returning to a career path or starting a new one. And they're there to learn with the expectation that this class is going to be a beginning for them. And they're also there because they need some help setting some obtainable goals. And that's part of what we do, is help them really think about where are you going to start? Where are you going to be in a couple of months? Where are you going to be in a year? Where are you going to be in 3 years? Where are you going to be in 5 years? We also work, as I said, we work on interview questions, looking for a job, interview behaviors, because many times the workplace culture where our students are coming from is really different from the workplace culture of the United States. And they need to be aware of that. They need to be aware of what the expectations are going to be for them when they start work in the United States. We provide in all of our classes contextualized language skills. So we're focusing the language that we're teaching. Yes, it's English, but it's also the language of the bridge that they're in. I always tell students if they start feeling intimidated, that's okay. You're in the healthcare bridge class. You're learning a new language. It's the language of medicine. Nobody, including medical professionals, go into the medical field, start their training knowing all there is to know about the medical field and the vocabulary and the instruments. That's why you're in this class. And so we try and contextualize it as much as we can to help them be prepared. And then there are barriers, and some of the barriers you need to be aware of that we are constantly challenged by for us is childcare and also transportation.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather. And to answer a question in the Q&A, what kind of language requirements did the healthcare providers have, and how did you work that into your training for your ELAs? That is one thing that we do with all of our bridges, is continually going back to our employer partners that we work with. So our workforce development team works with over 200 employers across Chicagoland to place our newly arrived refugees and asylum seekers in their first jobs. And then our career pathways team works on those career advancement positions and employers. And so going back to those industry specific employers and asking them, what are your students struggling with? And even as we developed this pre-bridge to ICAPS with COD, one of the questions we asked COD was, what do our students most struggle with as they enter the healthcare field? And we were told their speaking skills. We had assumed it was reading, because in order to even gain eligibility for an ICAPS, our learners need a higher reading level than they typically have. And so that's one of the things we've been really trying to build up. But also it made complete sense in that CNA environment to be able to not only listen to patients and understand what they're saying, but also to speak in such a way that the students, that the patients can understand, was critical. And so really working on building that in, which I'll talk about in a minute in terms of the resource that we picked for that class. But really quickly, just a quick snippet into the sewing realm. We're developing this sewing class because one of the exciting things is the ability to now, the invitation to develop low NRS level bridges and ICAPS. And because, again, 75% of our learners are in that NRS 1 to 3, and oftentimes 70% are in the NRS 1 realm. And we have a lot of emerging literacy learners who've never been to school before. They've never seen the language in written form. And so just seeing how do we actually serve those students who do need jobs. And living in Chicagoland, we need multiple wage earners in each home, even just to afford to live here. So based on student demand, industry need, and the content area expertise of many of our emerging literacy learners, we developed this sewing bridge and are working to roll that out pending funding. But really, that piece too of the incorporation of multilingual supports is huge in really working to develop bridge programs that meet student needs and hones in on specific skills they already have. So there's really assets-based approach, which is what multilingualism is all about, and what bridge programming really excels in, is that assets-based piece. So last thing that I want to just point out is how we also resource our learners. And so looking at the needs that our students have, Healthcare Bridge, we picked a book which is linked into the PowerPoint that you can find. Really inexpensive, and it navigates clear medical dialogue. And so speaking is a struggle. So we picked a book specifically targeting that for the healthcare field. Early childhood education. There's so many different career fields that a student could go into. And so we chose a book that really helps take a deep dive there. So resourcing is really important. Those adaptive support services, looking at what our students need and how to meet those needs, again, very important. But in the bridge to ICAPS realm, what we really want to hone in on is that piece of independent acquisition. So being able to develop the SMART goals, not only will we provide those support services now to make this class possible, but we are going to ensure that we have concrete goals with you on how you can then acquire that support service on your own independently after the class, because we can't take you to work every day. We can't provide childcare for work every day. But one of the ways to make you self-sufficient is to show you the way to find it yourself in a long-term capacity. And so really all of these support services are built toward developing self-sufficiency, which is the goal of AFLA, ILCE, all that we do, and what our students truly need. And so just looking at, again, providing what our students truly need, multilingualism with that assets-based approach toward developing self-sufficiency. So looking at, we have 52 languages represented in our program, but we boil that down to 10 to 12 shared languages, and then translate our materials into those core languages and provide live interpretation for things like success coach meetings or transitions conversations, SMART goal development, so that our students actually know what is available to them, how to access it, and can create concrete plans. Really from that point, just wanting to share Heather finishing this last slide, and then we will hand it over to Amy for the next presentation.
Yeah, just a quick, I'll never forget when I started teaching this, and I was at a conference and somebody was asking, what are you doing now? And I was like, well, now I'm teaching, I'm doing bridge. I'm really afraid of those bridge classes. That's what somebody responded to me. And I actually have gotten more joy out of teaching bridge because it's challenging and it's fun. And I don't want anybody to not teach one because they're afraid. So start with the basics. And there's a lot of material out there that's available, particularly on the ICCB website. They have curriculum for many bridges. And that's where I borrowed, I got a lot of the vocabulary, a lot of the descriptions for the entry-level job positions from that website. I can't say enough about Sarah and Tara at the PDN. They put me in touch with a couple of great teachers at Joliet Community College and who mentored me through my first bridge class. And so don't be afraid to start and don't think you have to reinvent something, because if you've got an idea for a bridge, you can probably find information at the ICCB. And again, you just want to think about who are your learners, who are the people who are coming to you and saying, this is what we'd like to learn. And typically it's going to be people who maybe they're trying to get back into the field, but maybe maybe they're wanting to start in that field and they want to go to the beginning. So you want to start off with basics. And again, you can go to the ICCB website, get vocabulary, get job descriptions, anything you can think of. Then plan space for your program or your class to grow and to change. So in our classes, our healthcare bridge class for specifically, there's the third teacher is teaching this class now. We started it in 2018. I was the first teacher. We had another teacher who taught it, and now we're on our third. And I debrief with each person, and I ask them to be really reflective. What can we change? How can we make this better? What are the students asking for? What are you seeing that works and what doesn't work? And each class has changed a little bit because of a different perspective from a teacher. And that's really what's important, is looking at your class, seeing what's working, but also making sure that it is reflective of your students' needs.
Thanks, Heather. I'll turn it over back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much to Sarah and Heather. We really, really appreciate that. Amy, if you want to pull your slides up so we can go seamlessly into the presentation that you and Natalia have for us, that would be awesome. And if you have additional questions for Sarah and Heather, please put those in the chat and they can continue to answer.
Hi, everyone. I'm not sure if you noticed the last slide that Sarah shared. We did not coordinate this, but we used the very same photo for ours because it really is all about collaborating. It's about getting around the table and figuring out what we're going to do, right? So thank you so much for inviting us to share our experience. We have a lot of shared experience with Sarah and Heather because we also work with a refugee population in Chicago. I want to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do and where we came from, because I think the history of our development for our bridges and ICAPS is really important to understand where we are now. In this last fiscal year, we served 1,880 participants. Of those 1,800 or so participants, 500 of them were actively in refugee resettlement. They were coming as parolees, special immigrant visa holders, asylees. They had a case manager assigned to their case. That is a pretty small percentage of our overall student population. That's not to say that many of those others are not refugees, but they're not in case management within our organization. And so they may have a migration story. They may have immigrated here through other means. We're going to share with you the programs that we've developed for all of our participants because they're all English language learners, essentially. So in addition to our English language programming, we also provide citizenship, GED prep, job readiness skills, contextualized ESL for different pathways. We have bridges, ICAPS, and as of this year, we have welcomed back our IELC program as well. All of our participants in our program, no matter their English language proficiency, have access to our transitions team to begin the discussions about what are their next steps to pursue their personal professional goals, get their diploma evaluated, explore how they could enroll in a college and whatnot. Okay, so where did we start? In 2007, we established our premier bridge. It was really the jewel in our crown, right? It was called Hotel Class by our participants. This was our sole workforce development program. It was incredibly popular. Our organization worked with other resettlement orgs across Chicagoland so that we could receive their refugee learners as well. So we were kind of like the home educational provider for a number of different resettlement orgs in Chicago. We saw about 1,000 people between 2007 and like 2019 participate in this program. The majority of them, like well over 90% of them, probably over 95% of them, ended up in hotel jobs as a result of this class. So there were lots of pros to this class, right? It provided competitive pay with overtime. We had this amazing referral network with other community-based organizations. Many of the jobs within the hotel sector did not require a high level of English proficiency. And the class itself had really positive word of mouth. It was just incredibly popular. We would have class alumni come and talk about their experience. And it just really it was just an incredibly popular program. But as with any program, there were also some cons. In hospitality, as you all know, there's a high season and a low season. And managing to stretch those dollars during that low season was really challenging for a lot of our participants, especially those who this was their very first job in the United States. They were still figuring out how to balance their home finances, right? Hospitality also requires an irregular work schedule, and you need to roll with those punches, right? It's not a predictable schedule, which can be really hard if you have small children at home with varying schedules. It's also really physically demanding. It was not a job that was accessible to many of our participants who could not handle the actual physical labor of the work of being a housekeeper in a hotel. And as we learned, it was not a durable line of work during a global pandemic. Along with this hospitality skills bridge, we developed later, 2018-ish, our very first ICAPS. And this program was, I think of it as a choose your own adventure of ICAPS programs. All of the students entered the class where they participated in career foundations, career readiness, skills assessments, and things like this. And then they got to choose. Did they want to work in childcare? Did they want to become a medical interpreter, or did they want to go into IT? The class was developed to really lean heavily on virtual learning communities. It went from an in-person class to an online class in 2020, and it relied on a lot of cooperative learning. But it also required an incredibly high level of English language proficiency, either because the entrance exams, let's say, to join the medical interpreting class just require like advanced to near fluent levels of English, or because the course materials themselves from our education partners were complicated texts to really unpack. We had varying results across these three pathways. And when I say varying, I kind of mean a couple of the pathways were incredibly difficult for us to see any sort of completion. And the whole point of an ICAPS program is, of course, that we want them to get credentials and start working. So We found also that the format of the class, a semester-long format, is just frankly too long. A lot of things can change in your life in an entire semester. And we started thinking, if we are asking someone to commit to a class for 5 to 6 months, a lot can change in their availability, in their desire to complete the course. And we needed to pivot to offer courses that folks could finish much quicker.
Yeah. So as Amy said, the pandemic happened and the changes in the job market associated with it, and it really kind of forced us to adjust our model because our kind of one size fits all kind of approach with the bridge class, with the customer service class was no longer working because it was not properly addressing the needs of our students. So it was the time for us to, excuse me, develop new offerings for our participants. And for this, we started with conducting needs analysis. We surveyed our participant base, and we also pulled data across different programs, especially we pulled data from the transitions programs. And this analysis allowed us to come up with a list of things about who our learners are and what they need. And we kept these things in mind when designing our programs. So what are these characteristics? The first one is that a lot of our participants come to the US with some prior work experience and skills that are relevant to the job market here in the US. They are typically multilingual and they have experience communicating across different cultures. A lot of people are really eager to come back to their pathway and to be able to utilize the skills that they developed while working here in the US. And one fact that really speaks to that is that diploma evaluations remain one of the top requests and services that our participants ask for during transitions conversations. Obviously, our participants have broad range of literacy levels. They come from diverse educational backgrounds, but what is really interesting that a lot of them, regardless of their English proficiency and prior educational background, are really eager to come back to their fields and to get a job in the pathway that they're interested in. And it is not uncommon for let's say a level 2, level 3 English speaker in a transitions conversation to ask about vocational classes and ask about the services that are available for them, the credentials, the GED classes, and things like that. I would say that people are really interested in setting these long-term goals in a way. And what kind of stems from that is this need for flexibility, especially flexible learning, because the flexible learning allows people to juggle their family obligations and work with pursuing these long-term goals and credentials. And the last thing is that we found that our participants and a lot of people in general really are motivated, enthusiastic, and they're ready to invest their time and effort in pursuing a credential that will allow them to get a family-sustaining job, ideally. So these were kind of things that we thought about when developing our next offering. Amy, hand it over to you.
Okay, sorry, my computer is, there we go. Okay, so out of the ashes of our ICAPS program and our hospitality skills bridge, we developed our truck driver training program. We established it in 2022. We piloted it with a small cohort of students. We partnered with a local truck driving school that was just a few miles down the road from one of our locations in Belmont, Cragen. This allowed us to leverage the transportation and logistics experience of many of our newer arrivals. It did require intermediate to advanced English language proficiency, and at least what we learned from our education partner was that it required at least a year of driving experience in the United States. That seemed to be a pretty important prerequisite. So our primary focus in that ICAPS was test prep and then navigating systems, right? Figuring out how to communicate and navigate the DMV effectively.
We had multiple cohorts of the ICAPS program, and upon analyzing the success rate of this program and also like the profiles of successful candidates, we realized that English language still remained kind of a barrier to a lot of our students, partially because the materials that you need to study to be able to obtain these credentials these materials have a lot of technical terms and really complex grammar structures, but also because the state back then started to tighten the English language requirements. So we realized that among our applicants, there are a lot of people who are life ready. They are really motivated. They want to pursue this credential, but English can become a barrier. This is how we developed a CLP bridge class with the kind of the aim to help people improve their language skills, specifically their reading skills, because they need to engage with these materials and be able to learn from these materials and prepare for the exams, but also help them kind of help them learn how to navigate the systems, bureaucratic systems, and engage them in different like career-related activities to prepare them for this transition towards ICAPS in a more effective way.
So now we've got this commercial driver's license ICAPS. We have a commercial learner's permit bridge, but there was still quite a few of our students who needed something a little more preliminary. And so our English for Driving in America class was born. I'm pleased to report that we just piloted our first cohort of that class. It ended last week. The primary focus of that class was to demystify the driver's license process entirely in the United States. And I mean just like normal car, not truck. So to walk through kind of like key language that they needed to acquire to successfully communicate at the DMV. We went over those driver's license written exam questions. We explained kind of the key vocabulary in the actual driving practical exam. Again, talking about DMV navigation. We know that a lot of our participants come to the United States. They want to start driving immediately because it makes so many things so much easier. And so this was what we saw as the first hurdle that our participants needed to overcome before they could pursue other work. And many of them are interested in getting into this transportation and logistics sector. So what did we learn? We learned that establishing an ICAPS that aligns with participant expertise and their motivations is the number one priority, right? As Sarah mentioned, if you design one for an employer partner, that might sound really great, but if you can't recruit people to join it, well, you're going to have problems. We also learned that focusing on skills specifically to navigate bureaucratic systems, essential. The language acquisition is one thing, but just the literal physical presentation of yourself in a bureaucratic environment, confidently walking up to a desk and asserting what it is that you need, those are really important skills.
Mm-hmm. The next thing that we learned is that an inclusive program recruits for itself. What we mean here is that if your program presents a good opportunity in the pathway, it will start attracting everyone who's interested in this pathway, regarding of their English level, educational background, or their general readiness, I would say. And the approach that really proved beneficial to us was not to turn them down, these applicants down, but to still screen them, analyze what their needs are, analyze what areas for growth they have, and then build our programs based on this data, based on this information. In this way, when you look at our, let's say, driving offerings, you'll see how they kind of scaffold, right, to this ICAPS that gives people the credential that they need. And the next thing is contextualized ESL classes. Again, we learned that they're important within pathways. First of all, because they allow you to prepare good applicants for your next programs, right? So they also allow you to engage with the learners that you have, and kind of regardless of their English language proficiency, right? So you can engage learners and help them start building those skills and those knowledge about their desired industries. And the last thing is that this type of classes, contextualized ESL classes, help you pilot certain ideas. So if you're thinking about developing a bridge or ICAPS program, if you start with the contextualized ESL, you will be able to get a grasp of how many people are interested and whether this course will be in demand.
Yeah, I think what we really learned here is that if we're going to develop an ICAPS, we need to kind of simultaneously be thinking about what the bridge and the related contextualized ESL class might be, and also vice versa. If we're developing a contextualized ESL class about healthcare careers, we should simultaneously be thinking about what those next steps will be and get the ball rolling there. The other thing we learned, painfully, is that even darling programs like our hospitality skills training class become obsolete. There was a time when every single new arrival enrolled automatically in that class and then got a job at a hotel. We were being told in 2020, 2021, and 22 by participants, yeah, no, thank you. I don't want to work in a hotel. That was big. And we were also observing job market trends. Things changed, and they changed dramatically. Piloting with small cohorts is really essential. I think that's kind of an obvious point, but it's something that we have really benefited from, is knowing when we're going to launch a program, we're going to launch it like 3 times in the first year, because we're going to learn a lot that very first time, and we're going to need to make some significant changes for the second and third time. And then I think the other thing that we're still kind of trying to grapple with is figuring out how to weigh the cost of a credential with the likelihood of completion and that earning potential, right? Our IT ICAPS that no longer exists, the credential wasn't that expensive. There was very little likelihood that they would complete, and the earning potential was likely good, right? The childcare one, the cost of potential was cheap, likelihood of completion was low, earning potential was low, right? Our medical interpreting course, which we still have, pretty affordable, better likelihood of completion, and earning potential for hourly rates as needed as a contract interpreter, not bad. So we found that this class was particularly good for people who need part-time work, flexible work, single parents, that kind of thing. So what's next for us? We are in the process of expanding into a new pathway, and that's our healthcare pathway. We have had a healthcare career exploration contextualized ESL class in the past, and we are going to expand that to a bridge with a CPR first aid certification, and then build an ICAPS in phlebotomy. And we've chosen phlebotomy partly because we get feedback from our students. In our most recent survey, healthcare careers was the second highest choice for vocational training. And we also chose phlebotomy because we have another CBO not too far from us who has a wonderful CNA program. We know City Colleges has a wonderful CNA program. We didn't want to create another CNA program. We wanted to create something new and introduce something new to our APC. And so we have settled on phlebotomy for now, but we'll see what happens as we're recruiting a partner for that. Again, we're going to continue to survey our participants, listen to our colleagues, listen to our case managers. They are the first folks who talk to our participants when they arrive. We are going to listen to our transition specialists because they have a really deep knowledge of what our participants are asking for and interested in. And I think the next frontier for us is to really intentionally incorporate multilingual activities across all of our career pathways programming. We have dabbled in it out of necessity, but what we want to do is really create some sort of a commitment to incorporating multilingual activities and to make sure that every single touch point in our career pathways programs has that opportunity for folks. I think that's it. I guess my last thing would be what's next is we would love to brainstorm with you, partner with you, and think through how our programs can continue to meet more needs of more English language learners and new arrivals in Chicago. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Amy and Natalia. Amy, you want to show that last slide or you can put it in the chat, your contact information you said about brainstorming. So I'm sure there's other people shaking their head saying, yes, we would love to talk to these two women, as well as with Heather and Sarah to look at what's next. Same, if you have questions, please put those in the chat, because we are going to thank Amy and Natalia for their awesome work and for sharing. And we're going to turn it over to Catherine and Jenny, who are going to tell us a little bit about some additional information about multilingual supports. So we'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Amy, for that wonderful transition there. You mentioned multilingual approaches and wanting to explore those more. Well, we have a new resource, hot off the press. ICCB asked the ALRC to put this together, a new document that spotlights good work going on in Illinois in terms of incorporating multilingual approaches in the classroom and on the program level. So this is what the document looks like, and it is available right where you click to join this session. It's there along with the slides. So what are multilingual approaches? Sarah Taylor talked this morning quite a bit about an assets-based approach, and that's really what we're talking about here, that multilingual approaches are both programmatic and instructional, and they supplement English instruction. And they are recognizing that the linguistic background that the student brings to the classroom is an asset that can be used to support language acquisition and to accelerate language learning. And we can find multilingual approaches useful in a variety of contexts. In your English language acquisition classes, many of you here today have IELCE funding, obviously in Bridge and ICAPS classes. So enhancing English language acquisition and preparing students for bilingual career pathways. And there's a very helpful document called, the title's here on the bottom of the screen, I won't read it to you, but it's part of the EARN project. And if you're not familiar with the EARN project, it's a multi-year project that was funded by OCTAE to look at a variety of methods for IELCE programming. So we have linked this document and the EARN project itself on the new Spotlight document. So have a look there if you want to learn more. So in our Spotlight document, we've divided it into programs that serve primarily one student language background, and those like World Relief that we saw serving many backgrounds. So I'll start briefly with Pui Talk Center. They serve primarily Chinese-speaking students, and they've done some wonderful work here. They offer an ICAPS in food service management for their students who are already working in food service. They use a collaborative teaching model where 75% of the class time is with an English instructor and 25% with either Cantonese or Mandarin speaking vocational instructors. They use translation heavily. Their own staff translated the study materials and the credential exam. So this is very innovative in terms of a multilingual approach, because the students are able to take the credential exam in their first language. And they've had really wonderful outcomes in that 70% of their enrolled students have earned the credential, which has allowed them to advance their careers and in some cases start their own businesses. Now, Jenny is going to kind of look at those programs that offer multilingual instruction with multiple language backgrounds. Go ahead, Jenny.
All right, thanks, Catherine. So one program that is offering multilingual approaches with students that last year they served over 30 language backgrounds was Trellis. And what they're doing is they're using AI translation and audio to develop some multilingual videos. Completed already are some videos that they've developed for topics such as their orientation and classroom etiquette. They did that by having a team of instructors develop video scripts that then went into the AI translation. In progress, they are working on some multilingual videos to introduce Bridge and ICAPS classes, and they're doing all of this with the goal that their students will be informed and empowered to ask questions about opportunities beyond English classes. They are also hoping to have instructors facilitate viewing of all of these videos during orientation and during the first week of classes. If you want to see a sample video in the Spotlight document itself, we have a link to a sample video that Trellis shared with us. It's really pretty cool. And finally, World Relief, who we already heard from today, but I'll just reiterate a few points that Sarah mentioned, and that is they started off by identifying some shared core languages. In their orientation process, they gathered data on students' first, second, and third languages of over 50 languages that they serve. And they used that information to focus their attention on which core languages they can do interpretation for, right? They have interpretation and translation for a variety of things that students encounter in the program, not just recruitment and registration, but also support for digital literacy, success coaching, and industry-specific content. And their outcome, as we heard from Sarah, is that they've seen some significant increases in MSGs for their English learners that are completing all of their wonderful bridge programming. To wrap up today, we'd like to thank all of the programs that generously shared their multilingual approaches for this Spotlight. And again, you can find this Spotlight document on the Transitions Academy page right under this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny and Catherine, for creating this document, for all the programs who shared, and for also coming and sharing today. So wow, you guys, you got a lot in this session. This was jam-packed full with great information. As you may recall, this will be recorded, or it is recorded. It will be on the site, on the ICAPS, the Transitions Academy site, on the ICAPS website. We will also add this document that Catherine and Jenny created on the Excellence in Adult Education website. So that'll be coming for you as well. Your next session, now it's time for lunch. So go think about everything that's been shared, and we will come back at 12:15 with resources, credentials, and Daisy. Oh my, I did not name it, but I do endorse it. I think it's a great title, and we're going to hear from Dr. Kathy Olson-Tracy, from Angela Gerberding again. We're going to hear from WorkNet, and we're going to share you with a bunch of resources. So that'll be at 12:15. See you all in a bit. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to all our presenters as well. Great job.